I never thought I'd be the kind of man to post something like this online. I'm a rational person, or at least I used to be. I work in IT, live in a quiet suburb in Oregon, and until recently, I thought I had life figured out. My wife, Clara, and I had been married for 8 years. She was beautiful, intelligent, and organized to the point of obsession. She had these eyes, calm but piercing, like she could read what you were thinking before you even spoke. I used to find it charming. Now I can't look into them without feeling my stomach twist. We met in college. She was studying psychology. I was majoring in computer science. From the start, she had this strange magnetism, quiet but controlling in subtle ways. She didn't raise her voice, didn't nag, didn't need to. Her silences did the work for her. If she disapproved of something, she'd just stare at you with that calm, unblinking look until you stopped whatever you were doing. I used to joke that she could telepathically guilt-trip people. I thought it was funny then. Now, I think it was something else entirely. The first time I noticed something truly wrong was after our second anniversary. I realized that Clara never slept. I don't mean she barely slept, I mean she never slept. At first I thought it was just my imagination. I'd wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning and see her sitting upright in bed, her eyes open, staring at the ceiling. I'd mumble something like, "Can't sleep again?" And she'd smile, that soft, perfectly composed smile, and say, "I already did." Then by the time I blinked, she'd roll over and close her eyes, as if pretending. It happened too often to ignore. Weeks went by, then months. I started secretly watching her through the small mirror on our dresser. I'd pretend to sleep, breathing softly, waiting for her to drift off. But she never did. She would just sit there, sometimes for hours, her head tilted slightly toward the dark corner of the room, the one near the closet. Sometimes I could swear I heard her whispering, just faint enough that it could have been the house settling. One night I couldn't take it anymore. I asked her directly, "Clara, do you ever sleep?" She looked at me with that unbothered calm and said, "Of course I do. You've seen me." But I hadn't. Not once. I laughed it off, but my chest felt tight. Something was very wrong. I started filming her at night. I know it sounds terrible, but I needed proof. I set up a small security camera on the shelf, disguised among some books. The next morning I checked the footage. Clara never moved. She sat perfectly still from midnight until nearly 5 in the morning, just staring toward the corner. No phone, no TV, no book, just staring. Around 2:46 a.m., the camera glitched, a sharp static noise, and when it resumed, she wasn't on the bed anymore. She was standing in front of the camera, looking directly into the lens. Her face filled the entire frame. Her expression wasn't angry or sad, just blank. When I confronted her about it, she said I must have been watching some corrupted file, that I needed to sleep more. But then she smiled and added, "You shouldn't record things you don't understand." I deleted the footage, not because she asked, but because every time I tried to replay it, my computer froze. And once, when I finally got it to load again, the screen flickered and her whisper came through my headphones. It wasn't her voice saying my name, though. It was mine. A few weeks later, my nightmares started. Every night I'd dream of our bedroom, except it wasn't our house. The walls were darker, damp, and there was this sound, like something breathing under the floor. In the dream, I'd wake up and see Clara sitting on the edge of the bed facing away from me. Then slowly, she'd turn her head 180 degrees without moving her body, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. When I'd wake up for real, I'd always find her in that same position, sitting on the edge of the bed facing the same direction. By this point, I couldn't function. I started sleeping in the guest room, telling her it was because of my snoring. She didn't argue. She never argued. She'd just give me that look, calm, polite, like she knew something I didn't. Then came the night I heard her talking. I woke up around 3:15 a.m. to faint murmuring from the hallway. I thought she was on the phone, but when I got closer, I realized she was whispering to the wall. Not just whispering, responding. There were long pauses like she was listening. Then she'd reply softly, almost affectionately. I couldn't make out the words, but I caught one sentence that froze me completely. She said, "He's starting to see it. I'll fix it tonight." I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning, she acted normal, made breakfast, smiled, kissed me on the cheek. I told her I had to leave early for work, but instead I drove to my friend Mark's place across town. He was a retired cop, a no-nonsense kind of guy. I told him everything. He listened quietly, then said, "You sure she isn't on meds or something?" I shook my head. He offered to check her background, just in case. When he called me back 2 days later, his voice was different, uneasy. He said, "Hey, I don't know what you got yourself into, but your wife's identity doesn't check out." I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. But he continued, "The social security number she's using belongs to someone who died in 1989, and the address on her original driver's license? It's an abandoned house, burned down over 20 years ago." I didn't go home that night. I checked into a motel, shaking, unable to eat or think. I turned off my phone, but even in that room I felt her presence, like she was standing behind the curtain. When I finally returned home 2 days later, the house was spotless. Too spotless. Every photo of us together was gone. Every frame, every album. On the dining table there was only one thing. My camera. The same one I used to record her at night. It was turned on. The red light was blinking. I pressed play. The footage showed me sleeping in the guest room. Then the door opened. Clara walked in, slow and silent, wearing that same white nightgown she always wore. She walked up to the bed and stood over me for a long time. Then she leaned down and whispered something in my ear. The audio was too faint to understand, but I could see her mouth form a few words. Then she walked out of the frame. I paused the video and zoomed in on her face, frame by frame. On the last frame before she turned away, her reflection appeared in the mirror behind her. But the reflection wasn't matching her movements. It was smiling when she wasn't. I dropped the camera and ran to the bathroom, splashing water on my face. I looked up at the mirror, and for a second, just a second, I saw her standing behind me, smiling. That night, I didn't sleep. I locked every door, every window. I kept a kitchen knife next to me. But around 3 a.m., I heard the bedroom door creak open. "Tom?" she whispered. I didn't respond. "Tom, are you awake?" Her tone was soft, patient. I stayed perfectly still, pretending to sleep. Then I heard her footsteps, slow, careful, coming closer. She sat on the edge of the bed. I could feel the mattress sink slightly. Then she whispered in my ear, "You shouldn't have looked for me." When I turned around, she wasn't there. The room was empty. But her scent, that lavender perfume she always wore, lingered in the air. By morning, she was gone. No note, no message, nothing. Her clothes were still in the closet, her toothbrush still on the sink. It was like she'd dissolved into thin air. I called Mark again, but his number had been disconnected. When I drove to his house, it was empty. Furniture gone, curtains drawn, no sign of life. I tried reporting her missing, but when I gave the police her details, they looked confused. "Sir," the officer said, typing into his computer, "there's no record of your wife ever existing under that name." Now it's been 6 months. Every night I still hear her voice. Sometimes from the closet, sometimes from inside the walls. She whispers the same sentence over and over again. "You shouldn't have looked." But the worst part? Last week I got a call from a woman in a small town 2 states away. She said she found a wedding ring buried in her backyard. My name was engraved inside it, and when she sent me a photo, the ring was identical to mine. She said she found it wrapped in a scrap of cloth, and on that cloth was Clara's face, printed faintly like a burned photograph. Now I keep all the lights on when I sleep. Not that I sleep much. Sometimes I still feel her sit beside me in the dark. Sometimes I wake up with that same lavender scent filling the air, and every time I close my eyes, I hear her whispering softly, just inches away. Don't worry, love. You'll never have to sleep again either. I never believed in the idea of haunted people. Haunted houses, sure. You can burn them, leave them, rebuild them. But people? They carry their ghosts wherever they go. My name's Daniel, and I used to think my wife Amelia was the light in my life. But now, when I think of her, all I see is glass, mirrors, reflections, and a smile that doesn't belong to her anymore. We met in the strangest way possible. I was working as a freelance photographer in Chicago. One evening, I was hired to shoot a wedding at an old manor house on the outskirts of town. It wasn't my usual gig. The place felt too quiet, too still. The guests were polite but distant, like everyone was trying not to say something. And the bride was the most stunning woman I had ever seen. Long black hair, porcelain skin, and eyes so dark they almost reflected you back. When I lifted my camera and met her gaze through the lens, something in my chest fluttered. It was like she was staring straight into me, through me, as if she'd been waiting for that exact moment. But here's the thing. When I checked the pictures later that night, she wasn't in a single one. Every shot of her came out blurry, not motion blur, not lighting, just wrong, like her shape was bending around the image, refusing to be captured. I thought my lens was broken, but every other photo was perfect. Even the guests standing beside her were clear. Only she was missing. A week later, she contacted me, said her name was Amelia, and that she wanted to thank me personally for my work at the wedding. I was surprised. I didn't even know how she got my number. But she sounded so sincere, so soft-spoken, that I agreed to meet her for coffee. She showed up wearing a pale beige coat and gloves, like something out of an old movie. And when she smiled, I swear the entire cafe went quiet. From that day on, she became a part of my life. Fast. Too fast. Within 2 months, she moved into my apartment. She never talked much about her past, said her parents were gone, and that she didn't keep in touch with anyone from before. I didn't push. She was kind, thoughtful, gentle, but there was something strange about her reflection. I first noticed it one night while brushing my teeth. She was behind me, brushing hers too, and I caught a glimpse of the mirror, only she wasn't moving the same way. I froze, toothbrush hanging in my mouth, and just watched. She tilted her head slightly, but her reflection didn't. Instead, it smiled at me. I turned around immediately. Amelia looked confused. "What's wrong?" she asked, her eyes wide, genuinely concerned. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to sound insane. Over the next few weeks, it got worse. Every reflective surface, mirrors, windows, even the TV when it was off, seemed to move differently when she was near. Her reflection lagged behind, blinked a moment too late, smiled when she didn't. Once, when she was asleep on the couch, I saw her reflection in the dark screen of the TV, awake, just staring right at me. I started covering the mirrors in the house, claiming it was for photography lighting tests. She didn't question it much, but one night I woke up to the sound of humming, a slow, low tune. It was coming from the bathroom. The door was slightly open, and a dim yellow light spilled through. I peeked inside, and there she was, standing in front of the uncovered mirror, completely still, humming to her reflection. Except, there were two reflections, hers, and another figure standing right behind her in the glass. It looked like her, but paler, with completely black eyes. The second reflection leaned forward, pressed its hand to the glass, and whispered something. I couldn't hear it, but Amelia nodded slowly. Then she smiled. I must have made a sound because she turned to look at me. "You shouldn't watch me," she said quietly, her tone different, flat, distant. Then she walked past me and went back to bed without another word. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She made pancakes, kissed my forehead, told me she loved me. And for a while, I tried to convince myself that I was imagining everything. But that illusion shattered the day my friend Logan came over. He was sitting across from Amelia at the kitchen table telling some joke. She laughed politely, but when he glanced toward the mirror behind her, his face went pale. He stared at it for a few seconds, then excused himself and left. Later, he called me and said, "Man, what the hell is wrong with your wife's reflection?" I asked him what he meant, and he said, "It smiled at me after she stopped. It didn't stop smiling, even when she turned her head." That night, I decided to test something. I installed a hidden camera facing the full-length mirror in our bedroom. I told myself it was paranoia, but deep down, I needed to know. The footage started normal, Amelia getting ready for bed, brushing her hair. Then at exactly 3:03 a.m., she sat up abruptly. Her eyes were open but unfocused. She walked to the mirror, stood there for a moment, and whispered something. Her reflection reached out, and this time, its hand came through the glass. The reflection touched her cheek. Then, slowly, Amelia's expression changed, from blank to terrified. She tried to pull back, but the reflection held her by the face and whispered something I couldn't make out. Her eyes rolled back and then she went still. The reflection smiled, its hand retreating into the glass, and Amelia turned back to bed like nothing had happened. The next morning she looked different, paler, distant. When I hugged her, her skin felt colder, like she'd been standing outside in the snow. And when I looked into her eyes, it didn't feel like she was in there anymore. I tried to leave that night, packed my bag quietly while she was in the shower. But as soon as I opened the front door, I saw movement in the mirror by the hallway. It was her, but in the reflection, she wasn't in the shower. She was standing behind me, smiling. I turned around, but no one was there. That's when I realized I couldn't escape. Not because she was stopping me, but because she was everywhere. Every reflection, every surface, every darkened window held her face. When I smashed the mirrors, I could still see her. Tiny fragments of her face smiling from the cracks, whispering. The next day, I called a priest. He refused to come after I told him what was happening. Said it sounded familiar, then hung up. Desperate, I visited a local antique dealer who specialized in old mirrors. When I showed him a photo of ours, his expression turned grave. He told me that the design matched a set of mirrors crafted in the late 1800s by a man named Elias Crown, who believed reflections were gateways to the in-between. He allegedly killed his wife and sealed her soul in one of his mirrors. The police never found the mirror or the wife's body. That night, I smashed every last reflective surface in the house. I covered the windows with sheets, broke the glass on the oven door, even took down the bathroom mirror. But when I went to the bedroom, I froze. The closet door was slightly ajar, and inside in the dark, something was reflecting faintly. It was a small hand mirror, one I'd never seen before. The handle was black, the glass slightly cracked. When I leaned closer, my reflection was gone. Only hers stared back. Amelia, smiling, her eyes bottomless. Then she whispered, "You broke all my homes, love." I had to come back somewhere. I dropped the mirror and ran. But as I turned toward the door, the world around me changed. The apartment grew dimmer, quieter. My footsteps echoed too loud. And when I reached the hallway, I saw dozens of reflections staring back at me from the walls. Reflections that shouldn't exist. Each one showed a different version of Amelia, some smiling, some crying, some with their mouths sewn shut. They all whispered the same thing over and over. "You married me in the mirror. You promised forever." I don't remember how I got out. I woke up in a hospital 2 days later. The police said they found me unconscious outside my apartment, surrounded by shards of glass. Amelia was gone. No trace of her. They found no fingerprints, no DNA, nothing. But sometimes when I'm walking past store windows, I still see her. Just for a second, standing beside me, watching. And every time I pass a mirror, no matter how brief, I see two reflections instead of one. Last week, I woke up in a hotel and found a message written on the bathroom mirror in steam. It said, "Thank you for bringing me home again." I've always loved quiet dinners. After long hours at the law firm, nothing relaxed me more than a home-cooked meal with my wife, Evelyn. We'd pour wine, talk about our days, and sit in that dimly lit dining room while the world outside went still. But lately, when I think about dinner, I feel sick. I can't even look at a plate without remembering her eyes. Those gentle blue-gray eyes that slowly turned into something else entirely. Evelyn wasn't just my wife. She was my balance. I'm a logical person, built from rules and contracts and cause and effect. She was emotion, color, warmth, a painter who saw beauty in chaos. The way she'd hum while chopping vegetables, or how she'd rest her head on my shoulder after dinner, that was home to me. But I should have realized something was off when I started forgetting things. It began small, a glass that wasn't where I left it, a meal I didn't remember eating, a conversation that she swore we'd had but I couldn't recall. "You're overworking yourself again," she'd say with that tender smile. "You always forget when you're stressed." I believed her. I had to. Then one night I came home to find dinner already set. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, candles burning low. Evelyn sat across the table, wearing the same red dress she wore on our wedding anniversary. She smiled as I took my seat, but something in her expression was too perfect, like a painting of a smile rather than the real thing. I asked her what the occasion was. She laughed softly and said, "It's our night." "Our night?" I repeated. She tilted her head. "You forgot again, didn't you?" Her tone wasn't angry, just disappointed. The kind of disappointment that sinks under your skin and stays there. I apologized, saying I'd been swamped with work. She nodded, cutting into her food. We ate in silence for a while, but the quiet wasn't comfortable. It was heavy, thick, like the air itself was holding its breath. Halfway through dinner, I noticed something strange. The chicken was warm, but the candles weren't melting. The wax dripped once, then froze in place like time had paused for everything except us. I blinked hard, thinking my eyes were playing tricks, but Evelyn didn't seem to notice. When I asked her if she felt something weird, she just smiled. "You always say that," she said, "every time." "Every time what?" I asked. "Every time we have dinner," she said softly. That night, I went to bed uneasy. I told myself I was exhausted, that I'd just imagined the candles. But at 3:07 a.m., I woke up to the sound of clinking silverware. I walked to the dining room, and there she was, sitting at the table again, eating alone. The same dress, the same food, the same candles. "Evelyn," I whispered. She looked up slowly, her eyes unfocused, and said, "You're late." I should have run. I should have screamed. But I didn't. I just sat down, like something was pulling me there, and watched her eat in silence. Then I blinked, and suddenly it was morning. The food was gone, the candles burned out, and Evelyn was asleep beside me in bed, like nothing had happened. When I confronted her the next day, she just laughed. "You dream too much," she said. But her tone wasn't playful. It was rehearsed, almost mechanical. Over the next week, I tried to record one of those late-night dinners. I hid a small camera on the bookshelf facing the table. The next morning, I checked the footage, and my blood ran cold. It showed me sitting at the table alone, talking, laughing, toasting with an empty glass. No sign of Evelyn anywhere. But the really horrifying part? My expression. I was smiling, nodding, reacting, like I could see someone across from me. And then near the end, my face froze. My eyes went wide. Slowly, I turned my head toward the camera and whispered something. I couldn't make out the words clearly, but when I turned up the volume, I heard myself say, She doesn't let me leave. That was the night I realized I didn't know who, or what, I was living with. I started digging into Evelyn's past. The address she gave when we first dated didn't exist anymore. The building had burned down 20 years ago. The art gallery where she said she worked closed for a decade. Every photo of her online was blurry, distorted, or mislabeled. It was like she didn't exist before me. The final straw came one evening when I came home early. She was in the kitchen, facing away, humming softly. I called her name, but she didn't turn. I stepped closer, and then I saw her reflection in the oven door. She was smiling in the reflection, but her back, the real her, was completely still. When I touched her shoulder, she froze. Slowly, she turned around and looked at me with that same perfect painted smile. "You shouldn't touch me when we're between courses," she whispered. I stumbled back. "What the hell does that mean?" She sighed, almost sadly, and said, "You used to love our dinners. You always begged me to make them last forever." Then she pointed at the table behind me, and when I turned, my heart stopped. There were 2 plates set, both half-eaten, but one of them had food that was cold, moldy, and covered in dust. The chicken looked days, maybe weeks, old. I checked the date on my phone. I'd been gone for 3 days. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the clink of silverware and her voice whispering, "Eat, Daniel. It's rude to leave before dessert." The next morning, I packed a bag and drove straight to my sister's place in Seattle. I told her everything. She didn't believe me. Who would? But she let me stay. I thought I was safe until the 3rd night, when she called from the kitchen. "Danny, did you leave the dining table set?" I froze. The dining table was perfectly arranged for 2, with Evelyn's favorite wine already poured into one of the glasses. My sister laughed nervously. "Weird. You didn't tell me you had company." I whispered, "Don't touch anything." But before I could reach her, she'd already picked up the glass. It was warm. That night, I heard humming from the dining room again. I looked through the crack of the door, and there she was, Evelyn, sitting at the table across from me, smiling. Except, her skin looked grayish now, like wax left too close to a flame. "I told you, love," she said softly. "Our dinners never end." The table began to stretch, the room itself elongating, pulling me toward her as the candles flickered in and out of existence. I screamed, but no sound came out. My sister burst into the room, but all she saw was me, sitting alone, laughing and talking to no one. When she shook me, I snapped out of it, trembling. The plates were gone. The table was empty. But when I looked down at my hands, they were covered in sauce, and something redder. I left the next morning, moved across the country, changed my number, tried to rebuild my life. For a while, it worked. I convinced myself it had all been a psychotic break, that Evelyn had never been real. Until one night, while staying at a small inn in Maine, I went downstairs for a late snack. The dining area was empty, except for 1 table, 2 plates, 2 glasses of wine, and a small handwritten note that said, "You always forget dessert." Now every night around dinner time, my phone buzzes once. No caller ID, just a text with a single word: eat. And somehow, no matter where I go, the food on my table is always warm. When my wife Lillian and I moved into our new home in rural Vermont, I thought we were escaping the chaos of city life. We had been married for 6 years, and things were starting to feel strange. She had become withdrawn, cold even. She used to laugh, talk about dreams, hum while cooking. But over the past year, her personality had changed into something that felt almost foreign. She watched me a lot, not in the cute, romantic way, but in an eerie, studying manner, like I was some kind of animal she was waiting to pounce on. The house was beautiful, though, an old Victorian with creaking floors, ivy crawling up its sides, and an attic that smelled like dust and memories. It had come at a suspiciously low price, but we brushed that off as luck. The locals seemed uncomfortable when we mentioned where we were moving, their smiles tight and polite. One old man at the hardware store even muttered, "That house doesn't forget," under his breath. I thought he was just being superstitious. The first few nights were peaceful. The air felt cleaner, quieter. But then I started noticing small things I couldn't quite explain. I'd find chairs slightly moved, lights turned on that I was sure I'd switched off, and sometimes the faint sound of footsteps upstairs when Lillian was asleep beside me. I'd get up, check every corner of the house, even the attic, but there was never anyone there. Then, one morning, I found something disturbing. Lillian was in the kitchen, humming a tune I'd never heard before, her back to me. On the kitchen table, laid neatly in a row, were 6 Polaroid photos. Each one showed me sleeping in bed. But the angle was strange. It looked like they'd been taken from the doorway. And in one photo, I could see Lillian's silhouette standing at the end of the bed watching me. I felt my stomach twist. "Where did these come from?" I asked her. She turned slowly, her face expressionless. "I don't know," she said softly, then smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe the house took them." I tried to laugh it off, but her tone made me uneasy. That night, I locked the bedroom door. I told myself it was just to make me feel safer. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the faint click of the doorknob turning. My heart started pounding. The lock held, but then I heard her voice, low, whispering through the crack of the door. "Why are you locking me out, David?" I froze. "Lillian, go back to bed," I said. Silence. Then, in the dark, I heard her giggle softly, not like herself but childlike, twisted. The sound faded down the hallway. I stayed awake the rest of the night, my eyes fixed on the door. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. I told her about the night before, but she looked genuinely confused. "I was sleeping, David," she said calmly. "Maybe you were dreaming again." But I wasn't dreaming. The door handle had been scratched, like someone had been clawing at it. Days passed, and Lillian grew more distant. She barely ate, barely spoke. She spent hours sitting in the attic, staring out the circular window. One evening, I finally went up there to check on her. The attic was dim, filled with old furniture and cobwebs. She was sitting on the floor facing the wall. When I got closer, I realized she'd been tracing something on the wooden boards. Strange circular symbols, carved over and over again until her fingertips bled. "Lillian," I whispered. She didn't respond. Then, without turning around, she said, "The house likes you." My skin went cold. "What do you mean?" She finally turned, and her eyes, they weren't the same. They were wider, darker. "It's been here longer than us. It sees everything. It keeps what it loves." That night, I dreamed of the house, but it wasn't a dream. I was walking through the hallway, and the walls were breathing. The portraits on the walls turned their eyes toward me. And then I saw her, Lillian, standing at the end of the hallway, her face pale and smiling, holding something behind her back. I jolted awake, drenched in sweat. But something was off. The room was too quiet. I reached over to her side of the bed. Empty. I got up, calling her name. No answer. I checked the attic, the kitchen, every corner of the house. Nothing. I was about to go outside when I noticed the basement door open slightly. The basement had always given me chills. It was cold, damp, filled with shadows that felt too heavy. I descended slowly, flashlight trembling in my hand. At the bottom, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The same symbols Lillian had carved in the attic were drawn all over the basement walls, but this time in something that looked like blood. And in the middle of the floor, laid neatly, was my wedding photo, ripped in half. Only my face remained. I turned to run, and froze. Behind me, Lillian was standing in the corner, her head tilted unnaturally, her eyes reflecting the dim light. "I told you," she whispered. "The house keeps what it loves." I tried to speak, to move, but I couldn't. The air was thick, pressing down on me. The flashlight flickered out, and in the last bit of light before darkness swallowed me whole, I saw the walls move, breathing again like in my dream. Only this time, it wasn't a dream. The next morning I woke up in bed. The sunlight streamed through the curtains. Everything looked normal. For a moment I thought I had imagined it all. But when I turned to look beside me, she was there, smiling peacefully in her sleep. Relief washed over me, until I noticed her hand. It was cold. Too cold. I pulled back the blanket and saw that her body was pale, lifeless. She'd been dead for hours. My scream echoed through the house, and somewhere deep in the walls, I swear I heard it echo back, whispering in Lillian's voice. "It keeps what it loves." And as I looked up at the mirror across from the bed, I realized something that made my blood run cold. I wasn't alone in my reflection. Standing just behind me, smiling with lifeless eyes, was my wife. My name is Ethan Ross. I live in a quiet suburb just outside of Portland, Oregon, or at least I used to. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who'd end up writing something like this online. But when you experience what I did, you start questioning everything you thought was real. You start wondering if maybe evil doesn't always come in the form of demons or ghosts. Sometimes it comes in the form of someone you once kissed goodnight. When I met my wife, Clara, she was a photographer. Calm, meticulous, and always behind a camera. That's what I loved about her. She saw beauty in everything. She used to say that her camera helped her capture truth. I thought it was poetic. I didn't realize until much later how literal she meant it. We'd been married for 4 years when the first odd thing started happening. Clara had begun filming everything, not just her photography clients, but us, our dinners, our drives, even while I was sleeping. She said it was for a personal art project. I brushed it off, even when I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and find her standing in the corner of the room, camera in hand, the little red recording light blinking. When I asked her why she was filming me, she said softly, "Because I want to remember everything about you." There was something unsettling in the way she said it, her eyes glinting in the dim light. I laughed nervously, thinking maybe it was just an artist's eccentricity. But as time went on, her obsession grew. She started installing small cameras around the house, in the living room, kitchen, hallway, even the bathroom. She said they were part of a documentary. At first I argued. I told her it made me uncomfortable, that it felt like I was living under surveillance. But every time I complained, she'd start crying, saying I didn't support her art. And I gave in. I told myself it was harmless. One day, while she was out on a photography shoot, I decided to check her editing room, a locked spare bedroom she rarely let me enter. I picked the lock and stepped inside. The smell of chemicals and dust filled the air. The walls were lined with shelves stacked with tapes, each labeled with dates and times, going back years. My name was on most of them. Curiosity got the better of me. I popped one into her old monitor. The screen flickered, and there I was, and sleeping, working, eating. But then I realized the timestamps. They were from days when Clara wasn't even home. One tape showed me sitting in the living room, flipping through a magazine, when suddenly Clara appeared in the frame. Only, she wasn't supposed to be there. She was supposed to be on a trip to California that week. I paused the tape, my stomach knotting. When I resumed, the footage jumped. Suddenly, it showed me asleep in bed, but Clara was standing over me, whispering something. The audio was faint, but I caught pieces of it. "You belong to me," she said. "You'll always belong to me." My chest tightened. I rewound the tape, trying to listen again, when something even worse appeared. The camera had panned slowly toward the closet door, and in the reflection of the mirror beside the bed, I saw someone else standing behind Clara, a dark, human-like shadow. That night, I confronted her. She didn't deny it. She just smiled, that unsettling, knowing smile. "I told you," she said. "I want to remember everything." I demanded to know about the figure in the video. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "That's me." I tried to laugh it off, but there was something in her tone, something that made my skin crawl. "You were in California," I said. "I saw your flight confirmation." Her smile widened. "Did you?" I didn't sleep that night. Around 1 a.m., I heard the faint sound of a camera shutter. Click, click, click. I opened my eyes. The room was dark, but the red recording light glowed near the foot of the bed. She was standing there again, filming me. "Clara, stop!" I shouted, sitting up. The light vanished. The room went silent. When I turned on the lamp, she was gone, but the camera was still there, still recording, pointed directly at my face. I checked the footage the next morning. It was impossible. The recording showed me sleeping. Then a figure walked into frame, but it wasn't Clara. It was me, or at least someone who looked exactly like me, sitting up and staring into the camera. The double leaned close and whispered something before the video cut to static. My heart pounded as I replayed the final moment over and over. When I slowed it down and boosted the audio, I finally heard what it said. "She's filming the wrong one." I didn't know what to do. I packed a small bag, planning to leave, but Clara came home earlier than expected. She stood in the doorway, blocking the exit, her camera hanging around her neck. "Where are you going, Ethan?" she asked softly. "I just need some air," I stammered. "You shouldn't leave," she whispered. "He's still here." Before I could respond, she lifted her camera and snapped a photo. The flash blinded me for a moment. When my vision cleared, she was smiling again. "Perfect," she said. "Now I'll always have you." That night, I woke up on the floor of her editing room. My head ached. The shelves were gone, all the tapes, all the photos, empty. Only one tape remained on the desk. It was labeled simply, "The Final Cut." My hands trembled as I pressed play. The screen showed Clara standing in front of the camera, her face pale, eyes hollow. She was crying. "If you're watching this," she said, "then it worked." The camera tilted slightly, revealing me, or what looked like me, sitting beside her, unmoving. "I had to," she continued. "He wasn't you anymore. He was trying to leave." She reached toward the figure, caressing its cheek. "But now you'll never go." The tape ended abruptly. I stumbled out of the room, heart pounding. Clara was nowhere to be found. I ran through the house, shouting her name until I reached the basement door, slightly ajar. I descended slowly. The basement smelled like damp concrete and something metallic. In the corner, I saw a figure, her camera flashing repeatedly in the dark. "Clara?" I called out. She turned toward me, but it wasn't her face. It was mine, my own face, smiling that same eerie smile, and in her hand she held the camera, the red light blinking. The last thing I remember was her, or it, saying, "Now let's record the truth." When I woke up, I was back in bed. Sunlight streamed through the window. The house was quiet, but when I looked to my right, the camera was on the nightstand, pointed at me. The screen showed a live feed of me sleeping, only I was awake, and in the reflection of the screen just behind me, Clara stood whispering, "Smile for me, love. I want to remember everything." I never believed in ghosts, not really. I grew up in a Catholic family, sure. My mother prayed every night, and my grandmother talked about spirits like they were neighbors who occasionally stopped by uninvited. But I always brushed it off as superstition. That changed after my wife Rebecca died. We'd been married for 7 years. She was my best friend. Funny, grounded, the kind of woman who could make a grocery store trip feel like an adventure. Then, one rainy night, she was driving home from work when a truck skidded through a red light. I got the call at 10:43 p.m. They said it was instant. They said she didn't feel a thing. I wish I could believe that. For months, I couldn't function. I'd wake up reaching for her side of the bed only to feel cold sheets. I stopped eating properly, stopped answering calls. My world just stopped. But then, 3 months after her death, I started hearing her voice. At first, I thought I was dreaming. It was faint, a whisper, sometimes saying my name, sometimes humming the song she always sang while cooking. But soon the whispers became clearer. They weren't coming from inside my head. They were coming from the hallway. I remember the first night it happened vividly. It was 2:17 a.m. I woke up because I heard something clatter in the kitchen. My heart pounded as I grabbed a flashlight and went downstairs. There, on the kitchen counter, was Rebecca's favorite coffee mug, the one with a chip on the rim. The same mug that had shattered in the accident, which I'd buried with her belongings. I stood frozen, the flashlight trembling in my hand. That's when I heard it. Her voice, soft, familiar, right behind me. "You shouldn't be up this late, babe." I spun around. No one was there. The air felt heavy, charged. My skin prickled as if the house itself was watching. Over the next few nights, things escalated. I'd wake up to find her clothes neatly folded on the chair beside the bed, her perfume lingering in the air. Her favorite song would start playing on the old record player, the one that hadn't worked since she died. I told myself I was losing it. Grief does strange things to the mind. But then, one night, she appeared. It was around 3 a.m. I was sitting in the dark, staring at the wall, when I heard the floorboards creak. I turned and there she was, standing in the doorway wearing the same clothes she'd worn the day she died. Her hair was wet, her skin pale, but her eyes, they were the same. Warm, loving. I couldn't breathe. I didn't move. "Rebecca," I whispered. She smiled, stepping closer. "It's me," she said softly. Her voice was calm, steady, not ghostly or distorted. "I came back for you." Every rational part of me screamed that this wasn't real, but when she reached out and touched my face, I felt it. Warmth. Her fingers were warm. She felt alive. We stayed up all night talking. She told me she had found a way back. That love was stronger than death, that she couldn't bear to leave me alone. I didn't question it. I just accepted it. For the first time in months, I felt whole again. But over time, small things began to feel wrong. She didn't sleep, not once. She'd lie next to me, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. I'd wake up and find her watching me, smiling faintly. Sometimes she'd whisper things in her sleep, names I didn't recognize, words in a language I didn't understand. Her reflection in the mirror started lagging, just slightly like a delayed video feed. Once I caught her staring at her own reflection, tilting her head back and forth as if trying to sync herself with it. When she noticed me watching, she smiled and said, "Just checking if I'm still me." Then, one morning, I found muddy footprints leading from the back door to our bedroom. Small, bare footprints. Hers. Except, it had been raining heavily all night, and the back door had been locked from the inside. I confronted her. She just smiled, the same calm, eerie smile. "You worry too much," she said, brushing my cheek. "Don't you see? We're together again. Isn't that all that matters?" It wasn't just the house anymore. My friends started noticing her too, or rather noticing something off about her. My best friend Kyle came by one evening and pulled me aside afterward. "Man," he said uneasily, "your wife, something's not right. Her eyes, they look different." I tried to laugh it off, but deep down I knew he was right. Her eyes had changed. The blue I used to love so much had faded into something darker, almost gray. A week later, Kyle disappeared. He'd gone for a drive one night and never came back. The police said it looked like he'd lost control of his car. But I knew better. The next morning, I found mud on Rebecca's nightgown and a faint smile on her lips. That was when I decided to test her. I brought home a silver cross, one she'd always worn before. "Remember this?" I said, holding it out. Her expression darkened instantly. "Put it away," she said sharply. "Why? You wore it every day." Her jaw tightened. "That was before." "Before what?" I asked. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Before I came back." I slept on the couch that night. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of humming. The same song she always sang. But it wasn't coming from upstairs. It was coming from outside. I peeked through the window. In the yard, illuminated by the moonlight, she was standing barefoot in the mud, her head tilted back, humming to the sky. Then, slowly, she turned toward the window. Her face was expressionless. Her eyes glowed faintly white. When I blinked, she was gone. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. But there was dirt under her fingernails, and when I checked outside, the ground where she'd stood was scorched, blackened, as if lightning had struck. I called a priest. He came that afternoon, blessed the house, said prayers. Rebecca watched from the staircase, her expression unreadable. When he sprinkled holy water, she flinched, just slightly. After he left, she didn't speak to me for 2 days. Then, on the third night, she crawled into bed beside me, whispering, "You don't need anyone else, not anymore." I woke up choking. Her hands were around my throat, her face inches from mine, but her expression wasn't angry. It was loving, tender. "If I can't have you," she whispered, "no one can." I managed to shove her off and run downstairs. I grabbed the cross, clutching it tight. When I turned, she was standing at the bottom of the stairs, smiling again. Her voice was calm. "I came back for you. You should have been happy." Her skin began to crack, literally crack, like porcelain splitting. A faint light glowed from underneath. "I gave up everything," she said, "for you." The light grew brighter, until I had to shield my eyes. When I looked again, she was gone. I thought it was over. For weeks the house was quiet, peaceful. But last night I woke up to the sound of humming again. Her song. It was coming from the backyard. I looked out the window and saw muddy footprints leading from the woods to my door.